Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back. That's right, we have a great video for you today talking about, well, of course, Fantastic Four, if you saw the thumbnail. And Marvel's Fantastic Four is about to let the bad guys win. Maybe, at least according to The Guardian, but we're going to talk about that, so here we go. First and foremost, before we get started, I have some very special guests with me today. It's Nat and The Guy. Their channel in English, that's the one you want to look for, is about to get to 1K. So do me a favor, go over there, check out their channel. They have a lot of brilliant insight, and let's get them over that 1K level so they can monetize that beast. All right. They're also known for another channel with which they do very well. I'm sure they can advertise that when we get to the end of the video. But let's talk about this because I think this is an interesting story, and it's interesting that it's coming out of a UK, The Guardian. Let's just say it that way. First steps to ruin. That's not a great start. A heck of a headline, though. Is Marvel Fantastic Four finally about to let the bad guys win? Is cosmic obliteration really what the future holds, as the latest trailer for the forthcoming First Steps appears to show? Do you guys have any initial reaction to that? Do you think that's something that's on the table, at least for this?
Well, it seems like they keep trying to get the bad guys to win, or at least to humanize or give them backstories for every single newer property we see. They're trying to make bad guys not as bad, or at least explain their badness, so we don't get just bad guys anymore. There's always an explanation as to why they're bad, and a justification almost.
So you think that backstory may harm them in some way? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think my opinion is they went this feminist route and made all the heroes women, and now they want to they made all the men villains, but now they're making the men try to come into heroes. So it's really confusing, kind of. I think Hollywood's really confused right now, and I think it's going to confuse audiences even more.
Oh, no, I'm with you 100%. I think the oddest thing, or oddest decision, I think the MCU and DC made was to suddenly center their female heroes and make them the ultimate leaders of all of these different groups. And I have to say, this latest attempt with what they're going to do with Mary Sue Storm is going to be a real problem. Now, we'll let the article kind of guide us through this conversation, but I thought, maybe they have an explanation for what we're about to see. If Thanos really had finger snapped away half of the life in the universe and then kicked back on his scorched titan homestead like a giant purple Centaurus, I guess. Centaurus? I don't even know how to say that, but look, what if Ultron had succeeded in uploading himself into the cloud? That'd been a disaster. Turning every smart fridge and Fitbit into a genocidal death bot. Well, or at least, you could get botulism that way. What if Loki had kept the Tesseract and conquered Earth and turned the Avengers Tower into a golden skyscraper shaped like his own smirking face? All of those are pretty good questions, but these are Marvel sliding doors moments we are secretly relieved that we will never see. Too bleak, too bonkers, or too off-brand to survive outside the whiteboard of producer and Marvel boss Kevin Feige. Now, I'm going to stop here and say, do you believe, this is a question of what you believe, so it's an opinion, that perhaps Kevin Feige being allowed to play with all the toys in the toy box rather than having somebody there managing it like Ike Perlmutter has led us to this point?
You go ahead.
Probably. I mean, they've explored a little bit too far into ideas that I don't think they were either audience tested or even thought about fully before putting them on screen. And we keep seeing that with the series as well, and with how the whole universe has ended up and the direction it's taken. Also, all of the time warps and the time jumps and the trying to once again justify every single thing they do, because when the audience doesn't like it because they weren't asked properly about it or even tested, I think they're trying to cover up holes that they themselves made. Feige made.
Well, in a lot of these studios, what we're seeing now are the decisions that were made back in 2022, 2023, when all this stuff was getting financed, when they were writing these scripts, and now they're coming out and they're trying to recut these movies to not upset mainstream audiences because the culture is shifting. I mean, we see that with Superman. We're seeing that with the Fantastic Four as well. Pedro Pascal, I mean, he may be the next person up for cancellation here. The writing's kind of on the wall for him.
You know, that's actually a wonderful comment there, because you couldn't be more correct. I think that we've seen a lot of a flip-flop on how he's being covered for a lot of different reasons. He does some very uncomfortable things in situations that any other actor would, be disparaged for. And I think that's actually brilliantly stated. When you look at this film, is it possible that we're looking at a failure no matter what they do, even if they were to re-edit it? I mean, they just got done reshooting it, parts of it again, just about 5-6 weeks ago. So do you think that they're really still in the editing bay trying to get this to be somewhat acceptable to the audience post the Overton window shift?
Well, the thing is, when you start off with a script and your foundation is the way it is, it's pretty hard to try to spackle it enough for it to look differently without it falling apart. So I think even as much as they try to reshoot and redo, the initial ways that they've been writing all these scripts and all these stories is flawed. So no matter what they do, I think it's going to be flawed. And now with all of the controversies and all of the people speaking out negatively and positively about it, people are going to find flaws with it no matter what. So I think they're in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Oh, they've already been labeled as the MCU, and we kind of seen what happened with Ballerina. Ballerina was a good movie. So even when you put a good movie out there, if it rubs the fans the wrong way, and man, I was really disappointed to see Ballerina did not succeed at the theater, because it was good. This doesn't look like it's going to be a good movie, and it's labeled with that, I guess that
feminism,
that feminist kind of shadow.
It reeks of girl boss is what you're trying not to say. You're
Exactly.
100% right. And that's the problem, is the marketing has been so poor in what we've been presented. And I think that it's been presented in that way because they've been coached all along to, lead with the feminism, lead with the girl boss, lead with these things. And even if they try to shift it now, I don't think that they're going to be effective at changing, early word on this. And if they don't actually have good word of mouth that first weekend, as I predicted before, I think this thing is going to open and very disappointingly, probably along the lines of Thunderbolts, if that well.
Well, and I think I almost think Marvel has burned their IP, much like Star Wars. And even if they do get good reviews, people are just going to wait for streaming. At least that's how I'm seeing it. They recently had, was that Thunderbolts that was out? Thunderbolts came out. A lot of people we knew went to go see it in theaters. They actually said it was a good movie. But people did not, the box office did not reflect that. And people are just going to wait for that thing to go to streaming.
And that's a real problem for Disney, because that even if it does go to streaming, it doesn't make them any more money. It might have some retention of the churn that's happening over at Disney Plus, but there's no financial gain there unless they sell it to other streaming services around the world, which, they do. But it's not as lucrative as perhaps when they were selling all of their stuff, or renting all their stuff, I should say, to services like Netflix, who just gobbled up everything Marvel and just put it out as soon as they had access to it. I don't see the upside for Disney, as I know a lot of people will just, rotate services every month to avoid paying for any of them.
And also, they've trained their own audiences during the bad times, I'll say, of 2020. They trained their audiences to just kind of wait for streaming. And because they tried to go so hard towards streaming as well and make that a thing for them, now their theater stuff is also suffering because of it.
Do you think that the new aesthetic that they're trying to present here in the article, the fact that we have this retro futurism, might appeal to audiences a little bit, because it does give us a different time period and a different look at what could have happened back in, like, let's say, the 60s?
Would have appealed to audiences, and we kind of seen it. They had success with it, and then they ran away from it, was The Joker. It was not a huge budget movie. It kind of looked like an indie film. They had one really good actor to carry that. Great character development. It was something different than all these superhero movies. People flocked to the theater, and then when they made Joker 2, it was a musical.
And with the aesthetic and the old-timiness of it, it could harken back to a better time, or what the more traditional people are looking for. But I think it's more of in a mocking way, maybe, and try to rewrite what happened back then to make it, you know, MCU appropriate, rather than as a more of a celebration, we should say, or like that aesthetic actually bringing something to the whole environment, because it's not coming in with some of the reality that was happening back then.
So do you think that because they abandoned the existing character development for all of these, well, for Marvel's first family, do you think that is going to be the largest turnoff, and that now the new leader of the team is Sue Storm and it is female centered, all the things we've talked about before?
Well, I think women don't care so much to see themselves represented as superheroes in this like very masculine, very I can do everything way. If it was a bit more true to femininity and femaleness, then maybe they'd be a bit more interesting. But by also, one of the things that came out about Pedro Pascal a while ago and Reed Richards and what they were doing with the character was that he was already deconstructed and that he was a more understanding man. So they're taking away also all of that character development. So by the time by the time he gets to the movie, he's like this simp. I have to say it like that.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You're welcome to speak freely. All I know is that the last part of this article is probably the most relevant, and it is perhaps the biggest concern for those who stayed through Thunderbolts to its startling second post-credit scene, which I was one of those people, because that's what I do. I watch movies. Is that the Fantastic Four's retro rocket ship is shown hurtling toward Earth 616. That would be our Earth, folks, for those of you who don't know. And if that's the case, that's kind of wrapped in a bit of harbinger of doom moment there. You've got Feige telling us that this may not be that ship. I don't know what ship it would be, but if it is, then all the efforts in First Steps may have been in vain, which I would suggest is probably the case and why they were so diligent in trying to reshape the end of the film. But the opening moments of, obviously, Avengers Doomsday is definitely going to be reflected in the post-credits for this movie. So I have a feeling that if this doesn't perform well and they show us an even more dismal future with Doomsday, they're going to knock the audience completely out of, like, any kind of interest or intrigue or anything else. What do you guys think? I mean, in light of that.
Well, I think audiences, at the end of the day, even if the whole story is all doom and gloom and horrible things happening, at the end, people do like some hope. So if they're completely taking away that to make the story more interesting, then at the end, you're left with not a very interesting movie, because there's no even development of the story itself. It just continues to be, oh, this is bad, it's bad, it's going to be bad for everybody.
Well, where the Marvel Universe kind of lost me is these alternate universes and all this. There's no real consequence. So you're making this character development and nothing really matters at that point, because you're just bringing characters back after they're gone. We can go to different timelines, different worlds. Like nothing really matters in that universe anymore.
So the introduction of the TVA was a disconnection point for you?
For him before that. I think he stopped caring a while ago. I kept on trying to watch and trying to stay engaged, but I do think they used that way of storytelling, that tool, I will say, too much. Because I know it's within the comics and it is an important part of it, but they go to it way too much and they use it to excuse themselves from actually doing anything significant.
You're right. It's a crutch. And again, I'm just, from that point of conversation, I would say that they should have just ended when we saw the natural endpoint and thought it was the endpoint with Endgame. I think this is a good point to tell different stories around a different crew of characters, and we never would have been in this position. But I think that their reliance as a crutch on the TVA and the stories that surround it have not only hampered it, but again, and this is something you've heard, you probably have said, I've heard, I definitely have said, that we now have too much homework to follow any of these stories. And I think that was the same problem Thunderbolts had, maybe to even a larger extent, because if you didn't see Black Widow, how much information did you have about her sister, and what stories were added to just with that movie alone? I'm struggling here. I wonder if you guys have any answers.
Well, not only like for example with Black Widow and the sister, not only is it that they were maybe trying to use that and the whole you have to do homework, you have to have seen this and this to understand this tiny little detail, and then the story makes more sense or makes some sense, but unless you've watched this and consumed this property, you won't be able to know. I think they hamstrung themselves by doing that too much, to the point that normies, let's just say, don't understand and aren't even interested in going to see it, because they almost already know they won't understand. And if they do go to see it, they end up leaving without much significance or from the movie to them, because they don't understand half of it.
Yeah, maybe just they need to start just making good standalone movies that are just good movies, rather than just stop worrying about all the merchandise, stop worrying about the universe, stop worrying about everything else. Go back to basics. They need to have a string of good films, and they're not doing that right now. And don't worry about even connecting it in. Make them standalone, make them good films, have a good solid actor they can center it upon, have a good director and a good script.
Because that's how it started in the beginning anyways.
Yeah, I know. It's so strange to go from Iron Man, which was genius, right? And you didn't have to like drag somebody into that one to introduce them for the next movie. I don't know why they abandoned the formula, but they did. And from that point forward, I think they suffered for it. Even as we were getting into the phase 3, we had too many characters being introduced and too many cameos.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've been talking about this for a while, and it's not just in the Marvel universe, but I think the sweet spot going forward is going to be $40 to $90 million movies, not these $100 million movies, $200 million movies. I think Marvel and a lot of studios are trying to gatekeep theaters by saying you have to have a movie cost $100 million, $200 million in order to monopolize theaters and kind of keep out smaller, really good films out of theaters. But in the long run, they're losing too much money on these big budget films. They can make just as good of a movie for $40 to $90 million, I think.
And you actually just described the mid-budget film, which we just had a bunch of them this last weekend, which we'll probably be talking about for the next few days. I want to say thank you to both of you, because having you here, and I'm going to keep trying to get you back here to talk about these things, give us some other perspectives that maybe not everybody here in the U.S. is in sync with. And again, your perspectives are broader, and that's valuable to me. I will say this, if you have not already done so, please go over there, check out their channel. It's Nat and The Guy in English, and you can check out their Spanish language channel as well, I'm sure, and find great opinions, great conversations, and maybe some regulars over here on my channel. Anything you guys want to add?
Thank you so much for having us, and we'd love to come back and talk more about anything.
Yeah, and this is the first time on this channel, but I've been watching Culture Casino for a long time. That 6-minute daily, even if I watch no other content, I always watch the 6-minute daily.
Well, I appreciate that, and I will send you a check later. On that note, go check out their channel and let us know what you think. Do you believe that maybe this is actually the final steps for the MCU rather than the first steps for the Fantastic Four? Do you think there's hope in the future for a film like Doomsday, which is going to follow right on the heels of this? Are they going to be able to set Doomsday up in a way that everybody is going to be ready for it with just this simple film with a lot of, well, characters that nobody has really heard of yet, or at least not in a long time? I just want to hear what you have to say, so let us know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And as always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya! But maybe not at the MCU films.